sneak in and out of the high school because I had to sneak out once before. And we snuck in. You had to go under a cyclone fence, across the basketball, then we had to climb on top of the annex and then onto a hallway. And then we walked around, and actually this way, and there was a staircase, and there were some high school kids outside wanting to get in, but there was a guard inside not letting them in. He was sitting on a chair. I knew this guard because he used to give out the grades. He had an accordion file, and he would come and so forth. This was a very large black man, and very nice man, I thought. And so he sees us coming down the staircase, and he's just looking at us. He's sitting in a folding chair. And Ernesto goes to him and says, "We are taking the high school in the name of the revolution." And the guy looked at us and said, "Okay." And he took his chair and he didn't leave the front door. He went down the basement somewhere. I don't know. At one point, when I did not participate, we had now like 20 kids in there. Ernesto and I had finished high school. This was, we finished in 58. This was early 59. And somebody said that we need weapons to defend the high school. It doesn't matter who you're defending it from, we had to defend the high school. So I did not go, but Ernesto went with most of the guys to where the weapons are, the police station. And they actually came back with weapons and so forth. So in any case, most of the time in those first few days, it was fairly peaceful. There were some firefights because Batista had left his henchmen behind. And there was not a lot of looting. Pool halls were looted, and mostly to steal the change from the pinball machines. All the parking meters had been stolen. Apparently, guys would come in and pop up the head and throw it in the car. And again, there was money there. So that was January 1st, 59. Over the next few weeks, it was still very exciting. The United States, which had said nothing when Batista's people were slitting people up and down, started to take exception that some of Batista's henchmen were being captured, they were being tried, and they were being executed, because this was savagery and so forth. And we didn't think anything of it. Or I certainly didn't think anything of it. I thought it was pretty fair because these were bad people. And that's the way it goes. And there started to be a rift between the United States and Castro. And at the time, again, I didn't think much of it, but in retrospect, a few months later, I realized that Fidel had played the United States like a chess master. I mean, here's a neophyte who doesn't know anything, going against the United States that had John Foster Dulles, Secretary of State, and his brother running the CIA, and everything Fidel did got the exact expected response from the United States. For instance, he came to the United States, and Nixon offered him money, and he said, "I'm not coming here hat in hand to beg." And then he turned around and said, the United States should give Latin America $30 billion, which was crazy. I mean, this is 1959, $30 billion, that was real money, not like today. And within a year or so, Christian Herter, who succeeded John Foster Dulles as Secretary of State, offered the Alliance for America, I think it was called, $20 billion for Latin America. So basically, what the United States didn't realize, all the United States had to do is call Fidel Castro's bluff, and that would be it. A lot of people talk about the mafia, how the mafia controlled Cuba. And maybe that was the case, but the mafia were pikers. And I want to read to you something that was said by John F. Kennedy in 1960 when he was running for president. And I'm quoting him. At the beginning of 1959, United States companies owned about 40% of the Cuban sugar lands, almost all the cattle ranches, 90% of the mines and mineral concessions, 80% of the utilities, practically all the oil industry, and supplied 2/3 of Cuban imports. So if you think the mafia was benefiting from Cuba, they were nothing compared to American corporations. And what happened then is that people like United Fruit, by the way, John Foster Dulles had represented United Fruit before he went into state. He was a lawyer, his firm represented them, and there are other stories on that. United Fruit was unhappy because their lands were going to be nationalized. And they weren't doing anything with the lands. They were actually fallow in case the price of sugar went up. So basically there were landless peasants in Cuba that could not grow food because they didn't have where to do it. So the United States under Eisenhower said, we're going to stop buying sugar from you. Now sugar was the #1 crop, by far the largest export of Cuba. And the United States paid a subsidy, paying higher than the world price of sugar. So if sugar was 3 cents a pound, maybe the United States paid 4 cents. But think about it. The United States was paying an extra penny to the American corporations that were selling the sugar back to the United States, at least 40% of it. But this was very alarming, and fortunately, the Soviet Union said that they would buy 1 million tons of sugar, about 20–25% of how much Cuba sold the United States. And then China bought some, and Czechoslovakia bought some, and I, who already knew that this was a communist regime, I was relieved, because what would we have done otherwise? So how did I know that things were not going well? At the beginning, as I said, I paid attention. Ernesto and I would actually pay close attention. And eventually, we both concluded this was a communist regime. My friend Ernesto, who has a great capacity for abstract thought, became a Marxist. He is now a professor of economics at Havana University. I, who had a more practical bent, realized that I don't care if it's Marxism or communism. I mean, I was not afraid that it was communism, because what did I know? Let me see what this would be like. But what happens is that the most important thing in Cuba at the time was loyalty. So when some business would be nationalized, the owners of businesses would take off and go to Miami and so forth. The person that they would put in charge of the business was not the most competent person at that store or that factory. It was the most loyal person. And as a consequence, Cuba became a haven for the inept. Cuba used to export meat, beef, and there was no beef to be had anymore. So our Minister of Economics, a guy by the name of Che Guevara, who, by the way, was about the most incompetent person ever on earth. The only thing he did right was get together with Fidel Castro. Other than that, he failed at everything. He went on television and he said that we Cubans eat too much meat. We, in fact, he said, eat more beef per capita than the United States, which is a temperate weather. And we're obviously a tropical. We shouldn't eat so much meat. We should eat chicken. So a couple of days later, Che Guevara came back on television to say, we're an island. We're surrounded by seas teeming with fish. We should eat fish. The problem was that there was no fish, there was no chicken, there was no meat. Anything you wanted, you had to wait in line for. A line would form, and people would immediately get in line, no matter what it was. And then they would say, what are they selling? Because it doesn't matter, I will not buy it. When people ask me, why did I leave Cuba? I said, half jokingly, because I don't like to wait in line, which is true. How did this happen? One example, we had a customer in the store that he had a store of his own, but his hobby was raising cattle. And, I started to work at the store at 15. I worked there from 15 to 19. And he would come and talk about his bulls, and I didn't care. And one time he came, and he was literally crying. There were tears coming down. He had about 200 heads of cattle. He had prized bulls that he would rent out to improve the stock elsewhere, and all of those things. And all that cattle was like his children. And it was nationalized, and the guy came in and said, wow, there is no beef. He slaughtered all the 200 heads of cattle, which was basically, the guy thought it was like killing his family. But again, this is tremendous incompetence. There was a company called Rayonera, which used to make rayon, for which Cuba imported cellulose, trees, and so forth from Canada. 70% of the production of Rayonera was exported. 30% supplied all of Cuba's needs. This was a big American outfit. When it was nationalized, the guy that was put in charge of running it said, the amount of dollars that Cuba is spending to buy cellulose from Canada is enormous. We cannot afford it. So he stopped buying cellulose from Canada, so they could make it rain. And basically there was nothing. No matter what the store was, you could not get anything, and if you could get it, it had to be under the table. No one wanted to do any kind of business on any fashion. In any case, by the way, I was talking about Boris earlier, the guy that would get you free under Batista. He was assassinated in his catering place right before Fidel Castro took over. I also mentioned the chivatos under Batista, the guys that were turning in for $33. Fidel did not have guys like that. He had cheaper people. Because in every neighborhood, there was a committee for the defense of the revolution. And those guys would tell on you for free. So for instance, when there was a convocation, I would go play dominoes with my friends. My parents in Cuba, without air conditioning, would close all the windows, all the shutters, and stay in the dark, lest anyone think they did not go to listen to whoever was talking. And that was the fear, which, by the way, was similar to what the Gestapo did, because the Gestapo had really very few people, but they used free informers to gather information. In any case, by around the fall of '59, I started Havana University. At Havana University, I was good at math. I wanted to be an engineer, and the university had been closed for 2 years. Sometime in '57, there had been the students that organized an attempt at assassination of Batista, which came incredibly close at killing the guy, and the university had been closed. So I was very excited. By this stage, I knew what Cuba was, but I had no thought of leaving. I mean, who wants to leave your country, your language, everything that you know? So one night, I had 3 very good friends that I made in school, and one night we cut class, and again, I went to school at night, I worked during the day, and a lot of the kids that went to school at night did not work, but the assumption was that the professors at night were better because there were people who worked in industry. And this was the first year chemical engineering was being offered in Havana University. Before that, it had been sugar engineering, but that's another story. So we cut class because Yehuda Menachem was giving a concert. Yehuda Menachem, by the way, got really pissed at us. I was very quiet, but this was a very loud group. So when we walked out, I saw somebody I knew, Billy Feldman, and he was with some guys. And before you knew it, the 4 of us were about 40 people. We're walking down the street, and then somebody said, "Let's have pizza." Well, I had eaten pizza once in my life. I was brought up in a kosher house. And the one time I ate pizza, I have to say, it was a nice Italian restaurant. It was thick pizza. They gave you a knife and fork. That was as good as anything as I had eaten. So I went in to eat pizza. And I sat at a table with 3 people I had never seen in my life before. In fact, none of us knew each other. So we sat there all night. We ate pizza, and we drank Chianti till they kicked us out of the restaurant. One of those guys was a captain. He was the president of my school, the School of Agronomy. And he had fought in the mountains, not with Fidel, who was all the way in the east, but the students had their own mountain where they fought Batista. And so he was president of the school. We became great friends. A couple of days later, he showed up in class and said, I'm aware that you guys